Hello, and thank you for tuning in. Today we have an incredibly special video. Why is this so special today? Because we have matching hair buns. Just joking. That's not what makes today's video special.
Silly.
What makes today's video special is many of you in your comments have asked for other spiritual teachers other than our guru, Swami Mukundananda, and seeing some reactions to those. And this is the first time we're doing a joint reaction video. There's BK Shivani, the sacred teacher, as well as Sadhguru, who probably all of you know, and of course Swami Mukundananda as well. And they're all going to be talking about the same theme, which is vegetarianism and not eating meat, as explained by the Bhagavad Gita. My love, what do you think about the mixed video about this important topic?
I'm very excited to do this mixed video as our first one of several, I hope, in the future. And this is such an important topic. I know that for me, in my former life, I was a meat eater, and now I'm a vegetarian. So, this is very relevant, especially here in the West and all over the world, the notion of whether we should eat meat or not and why. So this is really looking forward to and honored to be making comments on this video. So let's get started, and thank you for being with us.
When we are talking about our sankalp and our sanskars and our world, a very important role that is playing there is the food we eat and the water we drink. In our culture, there is a very beautiful saying which says, Jaisa ann, vaisa man, jaisa pani, vaisi vani, which means as will be my food, so will be my mind, as will be my water, so will be my vocabulary, my words. And which means food is not just nutrition for the body. Food is vibrations, it's energy. So it has three categories of food: sattvic food, rajasic food, and tamasic food. So if I want to have a sattvic mind, I will have to have sattvic food. I cannot have a tamasic food and say I want a sattvic mind. So I want divinity, purity, peace, happiness, but I'm consuming food which has violence and death. So it just will not match. So if I want to have a clean, pure mind, it begins with my anna, the food that I'm eating. This is also an experiment that we can do. Everything, spirituality and science, why they go hand in hand? Because both say experiment. They don't say belief. They'll say experiment. Experiment, experience. When you get the experience, that's truth for you. Till you don't get the experience, don't believe it. So keep experimenting, but don't reject without experimenting. So Jaisa
This notion of experimenting with different types of food, non-meat, and then literally seeing what effect it has on your mind, on your emotions, is so profound. And also I love the rejection of the notion that being spiritual means you're unscientific, versus no, science and spirituality are deeply aligned in that you should experiment with both, and then if you experience the truth, then believe, then have faith. Don't have blind faith.
That really resonates.
So keep experimenting, but don't reject
really
without
resonates.
experimenting. So Jaisa ann, vaisa man. We all know that animals have feelings, thoughts, emotions. We all know what happens in the slaughterhouse, right? So we just have to pause for 30 seconds and ask ourselves, what does that animal go through in the slaughterhouse? So what are the emotions that are there? It would be hatred, anger, resentment, fear, hurt, pain, and helplessness. And this is an emotion of the animal for many days. And after these spectrum of emotions comes violence, because the animal is killed, and then death. So hatred, anger, resentment, fear, helplessness, violence, death. And after all this, it comes in our plate and we say proteins and health. So it just does not match. It just does not match.
It's so hard to hear about this because so many years of my life. I had a wonderful family. My parents encouraged meat eating in the home, so I grew up with meat every day, and we loved animals. We had animals in the home, and my parents are wonderful people. So I never thought there was a problem between, loving animals and eating meat.
Like a cat or a dog?
Yeah, we had cats and just had a lot of affection for living things, although my parents did kill flies, and I think a lot of people in the West do. So it's so funny because, the meat would come on my plate and I wouldn't think of it as an animal. Like you say steak or hamburger, you don't think of it as a living thing that previously had feelings and was tortured and was murdered, and was fearful and sad and resentful. And so all those years when I was eating those things, I didn't think, what's that called? Cognitive dissonance, the disconnect. And I know so many good people, dozens and dozens of wonderful people with big hearts who are just loving, good people who eat meat, who don't think of it as a problem. But when BK Shivani invites us to pause and think of the horror that the animals experience, or if you do YouTube search and look at like the chickens in the cages or the cows who are separated from their calves and crying, and when you think of these things and you have a heart and you experience it, then you don't look at the steak as meat on your plate. You look at it as a murdered cow. And even though I have to admit, I'm embarrassed to admit this, the smell of meat still entices me, unfortunately, because I was grown up that way. But my intellect and emotions now prevent me. I've become full vegetarian and will be that way forever. No meat of any kind or animals of any kind. So, and I have no judgment and so much love for all my friends and family who are still eating meat. I understand it because I was there. But the invitation is to just make a pause. And I love what she said. If the emotions don't necessarily resonate with you, maybe the science will, that the animals are experiencing pain and hatred and anger, and then you're ingesting those things. And if those things are what you want in your life, then maybe that's not a problem. But if you're looking for more of a selfish reason to think about why you're eating, maybe not selfish, but more scientific.
One of the comments below on YouTube says, and it was really profound, if the walls of the slaughterhouse were made of glass, everyone would be vegetarian. Right? If we saw the horrors of what was occurring, we wouldn't view it as just steak, or a delicious meal or protein. I've been a vegetarian since 2015, and I spent the first 3+ decades of my life asleep about the impact of my behaviors. And now Swami Mukundananda is going to give his thoughts, and he's going to talk about it from the perspective of the impact on our own mind, right, as we're eating meat, and how it affects our mind, our emotions, our energy.
The Hindu religion doesn't have this forbidding tone. You do this or you will go to hell. You do this and you will go to heaven. The Hindu religion just makes you aware of the consequences of actions. So it doesn't forbid you from meat eating, but it tells you the consequences of what you eat. The Bhagavad Gita talks about 3 kinds of foods. There are foods in the mode of goodness, foods in the mode of passion, and foods in the mode of ignorance. Foods in the mode of goodness are those, the natural stuff that God has created for humans, the vegetables, the fruits, the milk of the cow, the grains. When you eat these, your body becomes healthy, your mind becomes calm and peaceful, and your inner being becomes conducive to enlightenment. So you experience peace, contentment, and satisfaction through the mode of goodness. And then these same foods, when they are cooked with the idea of gratifying the palate. In other words, too much of chilies, too much of salt, too much of sugar, too hot, too cold, extreme. Now the intention has changed. I wish to enjoy my food. It comes into the mode of passion. When you
Guilty as charged. I have to say, savory, spicy, intense flavors are probably my biggest addiction. You know, I've given up 7-8 years ago, gave up meat. When I was younger, I used to, I drank alcohol, I gave that up. When I was younger, I smoked cigarettes when I was in schooling and stuff. I had an addiction to cigarettes back in my early and mid-20s. Gave that up long ago. I gave up in the spiritual journey caffeine and then coffee. I've given up so much. And I would say the hardest thing for me to give up is spicy foods. I have a real addiction to it. And
even though it's all vegetarian.
Yeah, even though I'm eating vegetarian, the hot sauce, the spicy, and I gave up meat, but adding the spiciness to the foods, my mind is really attached to. And I've gone through periods, as you know, where I don't have spicy foods. It's very challenging for me. Sometimes I've gone 6 months or a year, sometimes 2 months, but, off and on. And I notice a very big difference that Swamiji's talking about. My mind is less attached. It's ignited with less irritability, impatience. I quite know that putting the spicy into my foods makes me less sattvic, makes my mind less peaceful, makes my emotions more rajasic and inflamed. And I do it anyways because the taste on the palate is so great. So I just want to share that I both know the truth of what he's talking about, and I personally have been unable to give that up yet. I think when I reach a higher state of consciousness, I will be able to, but I'm not there yet.
I have, in my opinion, the most wonderful husband on the planet who I cherish and adore and love beyond measure. And the qualities of my husband, it would take a whole YouTube channel to go through. But and his inspiration of all these things that he's given up, and also he gave up meat before I did. He inspired me too. So I can attest to that. Very inspiring, so much austerity. I can also attest to what he's talking about when I'm in, his presence as his wife, for the period that he's eating very sattvically. It does show in terms of reactivity, not towards me, but in work or towards anger. There's a little more, and then a little significantly less when he's eating very sattvically and in that mindful way, and just a little more when the rajastic, passionate foods comes in. So I can attest to that. Your own experience is a felt experience.
Yeah.
passion. When you eat foods in the mode of passion, this inflames the material desires. It sends the mind into a spin. I want this, I need this, I have to do that. So the person becomes agitated. And then the Bhagavad Gita says there are foods in the mode of ignorance. These are dry foods, these are stale, putrefied foods, intoxicating foods, and all the non-vegetarian foods. When we take these, it increases our anger, the inclination to violence, laziness, indolence, the darkness that envelops our soul. So the Bhagavad Gita and the scriptures tell us, look, this is the consequence of what you eat. Now you choose. But remember, whatever you choose, ahar shuddha sattva shuddhi, whatever you eat will have a consequence upon the mind and the body.
I just have to say here, when I gave up meat from cows and other meat sources, but I was still eating fish from time to time because I thought I need the protein. This was a lie of the mind. And my beloved encouraged me very gently, with no pushing, just to consider certain things. And one thing he said is, if you had to kill the fish yourself, would you still be eating it? And that next day I gave up fish and other animals forever. So when I saw that image and heard Swamiji saying, it increases our anger and violence, because it's completely intolerable for me to think of killing an animal in front of me and me to do the violence. So why am I okay with someone else doing that violence on my behalf? So that was a very powerful commentary to share. And I also just want to mention this kind of connection. Our first speaker, BK, said, basically the Western, the Bhagavad Gita's interpretation of the Western phrase, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. And what's interesting is in the West, I think there's this misconception, like a lot of people think, to be healthy and build my muscles, like I thought, because I was doing training at that time, exercise, I need protein. And this misconception. So for anyone who's interested, Swamiji has an amazing book on yogic eating and healthful eating, where you can get all your protein successfully and more effectively through grains and vegetables and fruits and legumes and all these things. So if that's something you're interested in exploring in a deeper way, highly recommend Swami Mukundananda's yogic eating book.
And now here's the thing. NFL players, professional football players in America, who have traditionally been known as the strongest, most powerful, physically dominant athletes, there's now a trend where they're becoming vegan and vegetarian, and they're showing that you can be some of the strongest, most physically explosive athletes in the world and not have animal protein. In fact, probably the greatest quarterback in the history of the game is a man named Tom Brady, and he has defied all aging records. He is still a MVP type quarterback, and he's, I think, about 40. No player in history has ever played this well this long. And he attributes it to several years ago, as he started to notice his body slipping, he changed to a vegan diet, and he says that's why he is now still performing like a 30-year-old and still breaking records. So we're now starting to see great athletes, really powerful muscular men as well, saying it's an illusion. We've all been lied to. You do not need animal protein in order to be physically healthy and strong. In fact, the science shows the opposite. There's all these alternative proteins that can keep you healthy, strong, without all of the terrible side effects.
What a powerful anecdote. Let's go to our last speaker.
Sadhguru.
Now, when it comes to food, what it means is we are taking another life, whatever that is. It may be plant life, animal life, whatever. You're taking another life, ingesting it, and you have to make it your life. That's the whole thing. What is your life, what is that life, if you look at it? All life on this planet is coming from the earth. This body is also the same soil, this is also same soil. If there is an earthworm, that is also same soil. But see how it has become, how this has become, how that has become. If I give you… You like a mango or a banana?
Mango.
Mango. I know, you're ruling the state right now. Now, if you eat a mango, this mango becomes a woman in you. If I eat a mango, the same mango becomes a man in me. If a cow eats a mango, the same mango becomes a cow in the cow. Why is this happening? There is a certain information or software in you. Whatever you eat, it transforms it into a woman. If I eat, it transforms it into a man. If a cow eats, that becomes a cow. So every life is happening the way it is happening because of a certain dimension of information, or in modern terminology, let's call it software. There is a certain software, which is an arrangement of information. Now, the idea is to eat as simple a software as possible. If you eat that kind of life, which is a very simple software, your ability to override that software and make it entirely a part of you is very good. As that software gets complex, more and more complex, your ability to integrate it goes down. So especially if it's a creature which has some sense of thought and emotion, if it has emotion, then you should not eat it. This is the understanding. An animal which has any emotion displays certain emotions, especially if it displays emotion which is near to human emotion, you should not eat it because it will not integrate itself, that animal nature will start manifesting itself. That's the…
What do you think of that?
That absolutely, I haven't heard it said quite like that. That
Me
was
neither.
so powerful. And it reminds me of the science that I learned when I was trying to become healthier. I wasn't concerned about vegetarian or not vegetarian. I was just learning about nutrition many, many years ago. And I was told, don't eat fruit with meat. And I said, well, why is that? It's about food combining. And I said, well, what's the problem? And they said, because meat takes so much longer in the intestinal tract. This is a scientific fact of digestion. And if you eat the fruit, it starts to putrefy because the fruit goes quickly, but the meat takes so much longer. So you should eat, if you are eating meat, they say eat the fruit first, let it digest, then eat meat and nothing else, because it takes so much longer to digest and it starts to putrefy in your colon. So that is the science of nutrition tracks with what he's saying. The body's basically rejecting, this is taking so long of my digestion because it's rejecting it. And then that's at the level of the body and science. At the level of spirit, it's because it has the emotion that doesn't want to be overtaken by your body.
Yeah.
Wow.
And this notion that the body and the mind need to integrate the food. And if we're bringing in food that's harder to integrate, we're going to spend a huge amount of our spiritual and pranic and mental energy trying to integrate it, trying to download that software, as he's saying, which means we're going to deplete our otherwise baseline level of energy, which is why most vegetarians feel an increase in energy. I know my energy significantly increased when I became vegetarian, because what he described as the integration process is much more effortless. And the point you made about the putrefaction, this is the final comment from Swamiji. Swami Mukundananda is going to talk about that exact issue.
That's the proper way of doing it, isn't it? Now, interestingly, many people are unaware, but the early Christians were vegetarians. The history of Christianity informs us that the early Christians were vegetarians. When Christianity first spread into the Roman Empire, if a Christian was caught, they would take meat and push it down their throat just to annoy them. However, when it got adopted as the official religion of the Roman Empire, at that time, meat eating became allowed by the law. The early Buddhists, the primary teaching of the Buddha was vegetarianism. Right? So Hinduism is not the only scripture or only religious tradition that talks about vegetarianism. It has been practiced around the world. And slowly, the Western world is also coming to this realization that, wow, vegetarianism is such a boon, and they are linking it to good health. It's a medical fact that meat eaters have a 200% chance of catching cancer compared to non-meat eaters. And why is that? Meat putrefies so rapidly. So it needs to be expelled quickly. That is why the carnivorous animals have very small intestines. It comes in and quickly it goes out. The human intestines are 10 times the body length. When meat remains in the system for so long, it causes disease. This human body was made herbivorous. It was not made carnivorous. If you see our teeth structure, we got molars all the way for grinding. The carnivores, they've got incision teeth, for cutting the flesh. They don't have molars. And humans have got molars all the way. The carnivores only do linear motion of their jaws. And the herbivores, they can do bidirectional and grind their food. So if you see biologically as well, we humans were made to be herbivores. Nevertheless, the Vedas say that it is a choice that you make based upon what your goals and aspirations are.
That's so amazing, because one of the most common things that we hear in the West, we don't really engage in debates because we just allow people to have whatever actions, habits they want. It's their choice. But I hear a lot of people say, well, I don't eat, oh, it's great that you are a vegetarian. I eat meat because, humans are naturally meat eaters, and, I don't want to disrupt nature. And I don't want to debate them. But Swamiji has pointed out, and if you read, there's a huge amount of scientific literature that shows that clearly, conclusively, humans are herbivores by nature, not even omnivores, not even a meat and plant-based diet. And he pointed out the teeth, the jaw structure, the types of teeth we have as molars, the intestinal length, that we don't have claws. There's so many different things that 100% of carnivores in existence all have, and we have none of those things. And 100% of herbivores, we have 100% of those things. What has happened, though, is in the last many hundred years, humans began eating meat when it was cooked on the fire, and they had tools and knives to be able to cut the meat out of the body, and then they cooked it because they couldn't eat the meat raw. It became normalized throughout human history, and now modern people think that meat eating is natural, a natural part of humanity. It's not natural. It's not part of our physiological biology. It's actually just become incredibly common. And there's a difference between something being common versus natural. So what I would say is, if you, and I don't mean this in a judgmental way, but if you're watching this video, if you believe that you're carnivorous, and say you like hamburgers, or you like cow meat or steak, instead of ordering a steak at the table, I invite you to go into the wild and see a cow and go ahead and eat it. You shouldn't need any tools. Just go ahead and have your dinner. Every carnivore will be able to attack that animal, extract the meat, but your claw, you will not be able to rip apart the meat. And then just if you even had a knife and you killed the cow and opened up its flesh, guess what? You would be disgusted by taking bloody flesh and putting it in your mouth. Why would you be disgusted? Because you're not a carnivore. All carnivores, no carnivores have ever been disgusted by bloody flesh. Humans are disgusted by eating bloody flesh because we're not carnivores, we're herbivores. In order for us to even be able to stomach meat, we have to have it cut out, placed into a small cube, cooked so that it's changed. We put ketchup, we put sauce, salt, pepper, seasoning, transform it, and then we eat it, and we think we're meat eaters. We're not meat eaters.
Jared, wow. I've heard you say it before, but that's such a powerful point. We'll conclude by sharing this. When these three teachers discuss all these different aspects, whether the meat eating changing, your ability to manage your mind, meat eating being physically bad for you, causing cancer, and meat eating being against the path of, the highest path. It's okay if you want to pursue only pleasures of this world, but if you're on a path toward God, consider making a change. That's the invitation. I'd also add the following. One of our very sacred teachers who we revere and love with so much of passion is Sadhguru from Paramath Nikatan, Sadhvi Bhagwani Saraswati, and she has a wonderful point, follows the Vedas, and she brings it into the modern context about the environmental, social, and planetary impact of the meat industry. Mm-hmm. The kind of crops that it takes to feed the cows, the kind of land, the kind of energy, the kind of water, and that if we converted the land that currently raises cows for meat, into grain-producing land, that we would be able to feed all the hungry people on the planet times a few. And she has all the science. But so if you're also concerned about social justice and environmental impact, these things weren't mentioned. You can look up Sadhviji's video on that.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. That helps the channel grow, and we so appreciate your support.
See you next time. Thank you.